episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show with another fascinating guest today, helping to create a better tomorrow on several different fronts. And we're going to be talking at sort of the fascinating intersection of areas today, from consumer packaged goods to artificial intelligence and everything in between. Today, we're going to be journeying back to our friends at the Pepsi company. And today, having the honor of being joined by Stephan Gans, who is Senior Vice President and Chief of Consumer Insights and Analytic Officer at PepsiCo, where he currently leads the company's focus on better understanding emotional motivations, anticipating consumer behaviors, strengthening its customer connections, and driving ultimate business growth at Pepsi. Prior to joining Pepsi, Stephan was the Chief Strategy Officer for Interbrand North America, where he oversaw both their North American and global practices. Before joining Interbrand, he was the co-owner and CEO of the global marketing consultancy EffectiveBrands, where he focused exclusively on building effective marketing organizations for global brand leaders. It was acquired by WPP back in 2014. Stephan began his career at Unilever, where he held both brand management and leadership roles in Europe and the United States. He has a master's in econometrics from the University of Amsterdam. A lot of very exciting topics to talk about today. Welcome, Stephan Gans, to the show.
Thanks, Ira. Great to be here.
It's great having you. I'd love to start things off as we typically do, just by a couple more minutes about your background, a little bit about how you got interested in the whole area of econometrics, and a little bit of your journey into the area of fast-moving consumer goods, personal care, skincare, and so forth at the beginning. I think that'd be a great way to start things off with who you are.
Oh, that sounds good, Ira. So I have to smile a little bit because you ask about why econometrics. It's the decision journey there was well, first of all, of course, I was 16 or 17 when I decided that is what I wanted to study. I liked math in high school a lot, and the only other thing I was sure of is that I didn't want to do what my dad did, and that is he's a shrink, and so I was looking for something sort of at the opposite end of the spectrum, I guess. So I decided to do econometrics and really enjoyed that. However, coming out of that, I realized that I didn't really want to work in it straight away, right? I felt more attracted to the field of marketing and joined Unilever in that space, and spent 15 years with Unilever in various categories. Most of the time actually sort of 50-50 in personal care, so skincare, shampoo, and in the US and the Netherlands, where I'm from, and the other 50% of my time in ice cream and frozen foods. And after 15 years of being with that company, basically after 15 years, I was 40. I felt an entrepreneurial itch, I guess, and I ran into two other guys who had, I felt, a great idea for starting a consultancy focused on helping CMOs and global brand leaders to really globalize their marketing and build the capabilities that you need to do so. And that is. And so roughly 10 years I spent building a consultancy with them. After four years in, my family and I moved to the United States to help build the business here. And we're still in the States. The business is gone. After that, I spent a few years at Interbrand, as you mentioned. And then just over 4 years ago, joined PepsiCo in this role, where in an interesting way, a lot of aspects of my background are coming together, and you could argue even my father's profession. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of full circle, you could say.
Absolutely. And Stephan, a couple months ago, we had Dr. Debrabander on the show from
Right.
Pepsi R&D, and we were talking about sort of this big picture perspective. We have Pepsi, this $70 billion company with these major, what we'll call blockbuster brands, the Pepsis and the Doritos and so forth, the world. Yet, she pointed out these trends that out there in the world nowadays, we have consumers that are much more interested in personalization, connecting to brands at a much more deeper level than in the past, and then obviously sustainability and all sorts of these issues are coming into play. You lead this consumer insight analytics team, 600 people reporting to you. Talk a little bit about sort of the overall responsibilities of your group, and ultimately over time, as you've dealt with many of these blockbuster brands over your career, how you've seen things change in the fast-moving consumer good industry towards this more personalized approach in this 21st century.
Yeah, that's quite a big question, Ira. So I think let me start with the role of my team. And you're right. I think it's now a bit more because we made some organizational changes, but there's roughly 750 people in what PepsiCo defines as this consumer insight space all over the company, working every day with brand teams or with customers, with channel leaders, or directly with consumers, because they pick up the phone in consumer relations teams. And those people are embedded in the businesses all over the world. I look at that large group of people as the consumer insights family, right? And my role is to really get the most out of all those efforts that the family makes all over PepsiCo for our business as possible. The key thing that I do, and that my direct team that is part of the global group does, is to build what I like to call the global might for the local fight, right? So I'm looking for opportunities to leverage PepsiCo's scale to get better at doing the local insights work in, say, Moscow or Rio de Janeiro or Berlin or Hyderabad, India, right? And so a lot of the focus that we have is on global capabilities, which is, to my earlier point when I said full circle in my career, which is really where the focus of my consultancy also was on, right? It's really like helping marketers to leverage the scale for better and a more sustainable business progress in their local markets. So that is really where my core focus is, and that focus is, of course, in the context of changing consumer behavior and changing markets. And of course, we had more than or are still having more than our fair share of disruption and change over the past, now what is it, year and a half. There's always this cliche that people this cliche of people who are somehow responsible for looking into the future, or people who are responsible for consumer insights sometimes say like the rate of change is never going to be this slow, right? I mean, it's everything is the change is accelerating, but I do think it's actually the disruption of COVID and the pandemic has really shaken people up to a large extent all over the world. And with if you shake up people, you shake up their specific needs and wants, and they're rethinking their dreams, they're rethinking their life. And with that come a lot of changes that we are grappling with today, all of us individually, but also, of course, also a company like PepsiCo. And those changes are, if you want, kind of on top of more, let's say, societal changes like the digitalization of life in general. The fact that people certainly in the Western world and increasingly and certainly, by the way, also in China, but increasingly also in less developed economies, people are expecting not to be treated as an average consumer, but they expect to be treated as Ira, right, and or as Stephan, and they want to be talked to in ways that are relevant for them. So when I was say 12 years old and I was sitting on the couch at 7 p.m. after dinner with my parents, and I would be watching TV. First of all, I would do it with my mom and my brother, and sometimes my dad. There would be 2 channels to choose from, and I would be sitting through an endless array of advertising from brands that meant nothing to me, right? And obviously those days are over. And I happen to have my wife Meg and 4 teenage kids. Most of the kids have been home over the summer, right? There's literally not been one moment other than the final of the Euro Cup soccer. Other than that, watching that final, we have not watched the same thing together at all, right, over the past summer. Everybody has multiple screens to choose from, and everybody has behind those screens are algorithms that tailor the content to their specific interests, their specific life stage, their specific what have you. And that is a powerful new way, a powerful new world of doing marketing, right? That offers a lot of opportunities. It has downsides as well, societal downsides that have become apparent over the years, over the last couple of years in the United States, for sure. But for a marketeer of consumer goods like PepsiCo, it has a lot of opportunities to just do more relevant marketing and to talk to people in ways that are more engaging and also more fun. Another really important societal trend, if you will, is the fact that indeed the expectations of consumers when it comes to what brands do in the world have significantly changed, and COVID has also accelerated that, right? So people look at brands not just as producers of products, but they don't judge brands and products just by their specific close-in functionality, but they also look at the company behind it. What is that company doing to make this world a pleasant place to live in for as many people as possible? And so these are just a couple of, if you want, really macro trends that I'm sure are not new for anybody. But the impact of those trends has been accelerated in some instances by COVID, for sure. If you think about the time people have spent over the last since the pandemic began, the time people have spent on their devices, and you think about brands like it could be Spotify, right, for example, and how fast they have grown, or Amazon, how fast Amazon has grown, or just e-commerce in general for retailers, from consumer goods or whatever category. That's not going to be reversed, right? If you have an underlying trend and then a disruption that accelerates adoption and that accelerates behavior change, then the world has become a different place. And suddenly, even my parents, who are now in their 80s, are ordering their groceries online, and they're not going to go back to the supermarket. Why? This is working. And so you get lasting behavior change that has a huge impact on everyday life, and hence on everyday products and marketers of everyday type of brands like Doritos and Pepsi.
And you mentioned at the beginning there, you talked about sort of digitalization, and I've watched some interviews with you about sort of how you've built this in-house digitalization strategy, whereby in the past there might have been some focus group data and some primary data out there, but now you have a deluge of everything from tweets to blog posts, message boards. You're collecting so much information that gives access to the consumer's mind. And then I've also heard you talk about something that you refer to as empathy at scale, and this empathy gap that's been created because we have so much data now. Where is the consumer in all this? Talk a little bit about sort of this concept of empathy at scale, and then how your use of digitalization, maybe some of these different tools that I've read about recently that you're using, help you sift through and mold some of this deluge of data that we have in front of us in 2021.
Yeah, sure. That's. I'd love to. I think what it all boils down to is that at its most fundamental level is that indeed, if you want, there is a deluge of deluge, I think I should pronounce it, of data available about consumer behavior. What people talk about, when, where, is it on Twitter or Instagram, at what time, who is talking about it, and all that is just one example of an ocean of data that you have available about, for example, snacking in the morning when you're at home. Yeah. Right? I mean, if you pick a topic like that, right? I mean, you can find so much data online, specifically through your e-commerce platforms, because you can see who's buying what and when, people often ask questions when they connect through e-commerce, or they connect with consumer relations, or they talk about it online and they ask questions, or they make recipes, or they give tips. All of that you can find so much data on. But what people often forget is that, that why people want that particular snack at that point in time, right? And really the motivations behind the question in the first place, or the need in the first place, that's tougher to get from data. And that is where I always like to say that the data is incredibly powerful to point you in a certain direction, but then you have to go really deep and understand, through being really empathetic with other humans who lead other lives than me and you, to really understand why they have that need and why at that point in time and why that category. And so what really talented consumer insights professionals bring to the company, bring to the party, is kind of a consumer science type of approach, mm-hmm. right? It's like the data, the analytics, and the granularity of all that, and the empathy that drives a real insight into why people have that need and want that thing in the first place. And so now, when you say empathy, or when I say empathy at scale, of course, ideally, you find ways of connecting with that why in an efficient way, right? So you can of course do let's say focus groups or store visits or in-home visits with consumers in a lot of different markets, and we do that. By the way, we can't do that now, and we haven't been able to do that for a year and a half because of COVID. So you start looking for other ways, not only to be more efficient, but also to deal with the pandemic. And so there's tools out there that, for example, one tool that we use is a tool that has agreed with thousands of households all over the world to place a camera in their kitchen that's always on. And people get paid a little bit of money for that. It's of course with people's consent, right? That speaks for itself. And people are interested in contributing to kind of an ongoing research as to, you know, what happens in the kitchen during the day. And what happens in the kitchen is a lot more than, let's say, cooking. There's also a lot of conversation. There's a lot of kids climbing on chairs to grab cookies at certain times of the day. There's a lot of why did you not eat your lunchbox at school yet again today kind of conversation. And if you collect a lot of material like that with the help of you can get the help of AI, of a machine, to sift through all of that material and find nuggets of observations that lead you to insights that are really meaningful and that really drive different commercial decisions and decisions around new products, new campaigns, targeting certain people in certain times of days with advertising, etc. So empathy at scale is really a kind of a to bring balance to the incredible amount of data and facts that we have access to, because at the end of the day, you know, facts, data points are reflecting existing behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if Steve Jobs would have looked at existing behavior only with his whole team at Apple, he would have never come up with an iPhone,
right.
Because existing behavior was, you know, was not necessarily giving you a hint of the fact that you would, you know, while grocery shopping, want to call your wife or partner to say that the cauliflower is sold out, and is there an alternative that he or she would prefer you to buy? I mean, if somebody asks you that question, like, yeah, I've got an idea for a new device, would you do that? 9 out of 10 people will say, sorry, I can figure that out myself. I don't have to call my spouse. But we all do that now because the thing is there, right?
Yep.
And so that's what empathy at scale boils down to for me.
Wonderful. And, you know, continuing on that, so moving from understanding sort of what people want into going a little further now, there was a fascinating article in Venture Beat magazine last month in where you were profiled. It was entitled "How PepsiCo Uses Artificial Intelligence to Create Products That Consumers Don't Know They Want." Right. And here, you go into, there's a fascinating discussion about a tool called Tastewise that you work with, where you look for literally billions of recipes and social media posts. And there's a fascinating seaweed story here. Thomas, sorry, go into this a little bit, because I really think this is another fascinating example of the depth and sort of the uniqueness of what you're capable of finding in this data, but also now tools like artificial intelligence, which we've discussed in other shows in terms of drug discovery and other tools. How this now comes back into sort of our daily life and these consumer decisions.
At the bottom line, it's not dissimilar to the iPhone example I just gave. Yeah. I think. Or the ultimate cliche of all cliches in marketing, of Henry Ford's quote of, if I would have asked consumers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Yeah, I mean, that is how the human brain works. Yep. So if we see through Trendscope, which is a tool that we use a lot, that looks at what people talk about in social media. Right, Twitter, all sorts of message boards, and all sorts of blog posts and what have you, and all. And so, what people talk about is a good reflection of what they have on their mind. And so, at some point, what we find when it comes to, and of course, you have to. There's so much you have to segment what you're looking for. So if you're segmenting all that talk or quote unquote noise, if you want, if you're segmenting it to food related conversations, and you can teach an algorithm to look for that, right? If the algorithm then spits out like, these are there's a lot of people talking about seaweed now in all sorts of recipes, and for all sorts of reasons. There's perceived or actual health benefits. There's this particular taste. There's always a search for innovation and something new. So there's that. So people are increasingly, let's say, with increasing volume of conversation talking about this ingredient when it comes to all those conversations that relate to food. The algorithm can see not only that there's a lot of people talking about it, but also how that volume of conversations develops over time. And the algorithm has done that thousands and thousands and thousands of times over the past 2 years that we work with this particular tool. That algorithm does that when you and I are asleep or doing stuff with our kids. That algorithm never sleeps, right? So there's like thousands and thousands of times an algorithm looks at how conversations around a certain ingredient, how they develop over time, and it can actually then learn which of those things have a shot at sticking, right? And so it can actually predict, in this case, that seaweed is not just a fad that will go away, but it can predict that is something that has staying power. Mm-hmm. That makes it interesting for us to think about it as a potential idea for some of our products. And we took that idea and applied it to a savory snack, and lo and behold, consumers love it, right? Now, the thing is, if you research this in the traditional way and you write a concept, we have an idea for a new snack and it's seaweed flavored and this is what it looks like, right? That's the way concept research is typically done still by most companies. You show that to consumers, they'll say, like, seriously, seaweed? I'm not sure. I don't really see that connecting well with snacks. But if you just know that consumers are very interested in that ingredient, and you make the leap for them, and you actually, hand them the product to try it out, and then suddenly there's an unmet need fulfilled, and consumers are very enthusiastic about it. And another example of AI is a tool that is so powerful in its simplicity, and that is like a Tastewise, and a startup from that we found when we were talking with a lot of startups actually in Tel Aviv, so 2 years ago. And what they do is they build an algorithm that just looks at each and every menu that is posted online by restaurants, snack bars, any type of food venue. Today, all food venues in the world have their menu online. So why not scan that for trends? Because 9 out of 10 times, trends, before they hit the supermarket shelf or the e-commerce, quote unquote, shelf, they will come to life in restaurants, and they will come to life in certain away from home venues where that type of innovation is typically ahead of the supermarket, right? And so Tastewise gives us a lot of direction also as to what people are experimenting with and what people are interested in when it comes to cuisines in general, and within that specific ingredients. So that's a kind of a proactive way of working as a marketer when it comes to innovation, that is enabled by AI, that is enabled by that ginormous amount of data that is out there that you can mine. Mm-hmm. It enables you to just literally look around the corner about what people are kind of secretly interested in, or secretly, yep. Not that they actively keep it a secret, but they're not really aware of the fact that they are up for a seaweed flavored potato chip.
Really fascinating, completely fascinating. Uh, Stephan, obviously, Pepsi, several years ago under one of its rock star CEOs, Indra Nooyi, it was a major sort of repositioning of the company back then in terms of moving towards healthy, better for you alternatives. I'm just interested in a lot of this because you're mining so much data, and I come out of the pharmaceutical industry, and we have a much smaller set of stuff that we look at, but I just want to, obviously nothing confidential here, but any interesting insights that pop up when you're, working on flavors or textures or this, that, and the other thing about sort of the next generation of healthy products, the good for you side of things, and sort of where we're going with that? Because I know there's always been a contention between sort of pharma and food. What's the future of health? Where does it reside, or is it somewhere in between? Any interesting trends that you see on the functional food side of things, functional drinks, things in this area that you might be able to highlight to us through some of the work that you do?
Yeah, so there's a couple of questions in what you just said, right? Health and functional food they overlap, but they're two different things. Let me talk about health first, and I think again, this is health as an area of interest and concern with consumers is a great example of an area that has been becoming more and more important for people over time, and hence also for companies that cater to people. But that effect that has truly accelerated as a result of COVID for a lot of consumers. Just like with e-commerce, if you want, that's been growing steadily for 10 years, and suddenly it's doubling in size. I think when I think about that, I think one of the things that the COVID pandemic really and very painfully made clear is that your underlying condition was a solid predictor of the outcome of your infection, right?
Yep.
And so if you're overweight, if you have diabetes, if your blood pressure is too high, that those were all negative indicators for a good outcome. And so for a lot of people, when they think about their health, they think about managing their weight, they think about what they eat and drink to keep themselves healthy. All of that was always a long-term thing. It's a bit like smoking is bad for you. I know it's bad for me. I'll deal with that when I have to deal with that, right?
Yep.
But that was suddenly like right now. I mean, there was like an instant need for and concern about your underlying health. So the interest in what we call whole health with consumers has really increased significantly. Now you see that in things like hygiene, right? So and cleanliness and cleaning your home, wearing masks, and am I hugging people, kissing my friends, or just offering up my elbow? You see all of that. You also see that in eating and drinking, of course. So there's a lot that definitely has a significant impact, of course, on the way we look at our portfolio of brands and the way we look at our portfolio of categories and products. Now, again, that is not something new. We've been looking at that and making changes since 15, 20 years already. And again, to your point, indeed, our previous CEO really jump-started that more than a decade ago, slightly ahead of the curve compared to other companies.
Yep.
And we're thankful that happened, because right now you have we have very strong positions in zero sugar drinks, beverages, for example, that are growing very fast, and we are in a position today that we can be in, because in those markets, because we started 10, 15 years ago. So that is something we're actively working in and with every single day, and I would say increasingly so as a result of the pandemic and the disruption as it has brought to consumers. The level of consciousness with which consumers are living in general, and specifically deciding on their food and beverage choices. At the same time, though, when we talk about health, the discussion often goes to like physical health, right? And as I just did myself. But let's not forget that an indulgent snack like potato chips that you eat when you're with or by yourself, when you want to unwind at the end of the day, or you're with friends or your family or your kids, or in whatever setting, there's a huge value in that moment of indulgence and the unwinding that comes with that.
Yeah.
So, not surprisingly, and this is very, this is public, we're a public company, our snacks business has done tremendously well over the course of the pandemic. Even though what I just said about health considerations is very true, at the same time, everybody was spending a lot more time at home, in a lot smaller, let's say, social circle for an extended period of time. And people were snacking more at home, and that is, of course, thankfully, with the pandemic now in some parts of the world easing down a little bit, and I think it's fair to say that overall, in many markets, unfortunately not everywhere, but in many markets, we're getting a better handle on the pandemic.
Yep.
And still, the rates of consumption of these products are still higher than they were before. So there's a different role for different categories, right? And there's a different and zero sugar drinks and potato chips, right? They both have their role, they're complementary. A zero salt potato chip will probably not sell very well, right? Well, actually, we know it won't. So every category deals with this in its own way. Now, second part of your question was about functional food, right?
Yep.
And I think that is an ongoing area of interest for us. And I think in your conversation with Ellen, you guys talked about that as well.
Yeah.
Functional foods is I think it's not necessarily something that immediately comes to mind with the core of our categories. So indulgent snacking or beverages. However, in some of the innovations, like a beverage that helps with falling asleep at night, for example,
right,
there are definitely opportunities for functional foods within our categories, and but I think it's for a company like ours, scale is important, right? Where we add a lot of value to, let's say, for consumers as well as customers as well as ourselves, is if we can do something really at scale.
Yep.
If things we can do that very well, and hence we add value. If things are niche opportunities, that's typically not very easy for us to do that well. Right. And we're trying to we're building capabilities in that space, and with keto friendly snacks, for example, and etc. And then the beverage I just mentioned, but compared to the biggest parts of our business, they're relatively small still.
Thank you for that overview. Stephan, coming back now just to the general theme of innovation, you've walked us through this amazing digitalization program, remote monitoring, artificial intelligence. Any other really cool tools? Anything I missed that you that's not confidential that you might want to mention that adds this really unique engine that you have for understanding the consumer mind in 2021?
I think what we've done really well over the past number of years is that, to my earlier point about building the global mind for the local fight and leveraging PepsiCo scale, is that it used to be the case 3-4 years ago that if you would test a certain innovation idea or you would test a certain advertising idea in some place in the world, the local team would learn from that, and that was it. And we spent a lot of energy and a lot of resources over the past years to standardize the ways of testing and digitalize the ways of testing on the most important types of testing that we do. As a result, we now have those testing tools live on one global digital platform that we've named ADA, named after Ada Lovelace, right?
Sure.
And that platform is able to, as a result of that platform, every time anybody in PepsiCo tests a certain ad or tests a certain product, the whole of PepsiCo gets smarter because the data the learnings from that particular test go into one central database, and so we can do what we call meta learning, and we are not dependent on any, let's say, outside vendor or search consultancy for that. Now, that is a way of building a capability within your company that we are deploying in more and more parts of the insights, and frankly also the marketing capability journey. And so that enables us to be a lot smarter. It enables us to be a lot more efficient. But most of all, it enables us to be just better at understanding who has a preference for what and why better, because we can really mine that data really well. And that is now on that ADA platform, there's like a transactional platform where we do a lot of testing. Mm-hmm. We've also built and are in the process of rolling out Ask ADA, which is our knowledge management platform, which PepsiCo never really had in consumer insights. And so for the first time now, you can really go on Ask ADA and just ask a question, literally, like you would do with Google. Yep. When you're in Manila or in Moscow or in Atlanta, it doesn't matter where you are, and you can ask ADA all sorts of questions about specific, the development of specific categories in specific markets and what have you. And the beauty of that is when I'm of an age where when systems like that were made when I started my career, like knowledge management platforms, or mm-hmm. they were often called executive information systems, for example, they were always about creating a database where stuff gets funneled into, and then there was an interface that talked with that database. The beauty of the way software works today is that you don't have to create a separate database at all. You just create a smart user interface that can talk to all sorts of different data sources and just pulls the relevant data points and the relevant information, the relevant reports or relevant interviews or whatever it is depending on your question. That is so flexible and easy to set up, relatively speaking, and so powerful for the marketers and insights professionals within the company. I'm super excited about that. So it's quite obviously it's a very internal thing, but sure. That's part of my role, right? It's not only looking out; it's also about enabling all those people in PepsiCo to do the best possible job they can. Absolutely.
And it's been a fascinating journey that you've taken us through today in terms of understanding these motivations, these behaviors, and sort of the detail and the elegance of which you've put all this together. Really fascinating work, Stephan. And it's just, I really want to thank you for taking the time to share with us, another member of the Pepsi family, and just the intricate, advanced thinking that goes on in an organization. Just really an interesting topic. And for everybody that's going to be listening to this particular show on our podcast or watching on our YouTube channel, you've been once again listening to Stephan Gans, Senior Vice President and Chief Consumer Insights and Analytical Officer at PepsiCo. Stephan, I want to take time to say thank you for taking time out of your schedule to talk to us and walk us through this amazing system that you've developed. Thanks for everything you're doing there to customize and personalize all our consumer experiences. And as we like to say on our show, thank you for helping to create the better tomorrow with all these types of innovations. It's a really fascinating story.
My pleasure. All right, great. Great to talk to you.